You're listening to the Men in Blazers Media Network, Suboptimal Radio.
When I watched that final, that was such a pivotal moment for me because 14, in my parents' house, watching the game with my dad, watching them celebrate after Brandi Chastain's PK, and just like the celebration, the sheer joy on their face, I was like, I have to know what that feels like. I have to know. And I never thought I was actually going to ever feel it. And then here I am, and I've gotten to feel that twice over, and that's remarkable.
It's Rog, delighted to be here with our very first episode of Road to the Cup Season 2, a series designed to dive into the sense of the emancipation, excitement and pure mindset of an elite competitor gearing up to not only play in a World Cup, but attempt to go back to back to back. And we sit here 98 days from the Women's World Cup this summer, and we're going to check in on the regs, talk about all things US Women's National Team and life lessons learned along the way of the preparation for the World Cup as we brace ourselves for what promises to be the most competitive and most watched tournament in human history. And we'll do it all in the company of one of my favourite people in football. Honestly, that's actually an understatement. One of my favourite human beings in the entire world. A great American whose wisdom, advocacy and generosity put the rest of us to shame. To be honest, I've been trying to do a pod series about her for many years now because, well, I've learned so much about life by watching her on and off the field. So much about her story and a unique perspective on the world and football that I love and admire. And I can't wait to share it with all of you. We are overjoyed. We're honoured, honestly, to have her on with us, fresh off a pair of games, last two before World Cup rosters are announced. From your Portland Thorns, the greatest Rebecca since, dare I say, the biblical matriarch herself, a true American footballing hero. Wahoo wah to US Women's National Team Captain Becky Sauerbrunn.
Oh, Raj, what an opener. I'm touched. I'm actually so much attention makes me feel funny, and I'm feeling funny right now.
I know it's been quite a week of attention, as we will discuss, and I am fascinated to how you've handled it all because we pod fresh off a lovely moment. Tuesday night, you celebrated the truly immense achievement, bloody incredible achievement. You become one of 13 people in our nation's history to break the 200 cap mark. And I've got to say, Becky, watching you on the field pre-game with your family in your hometown, St. Louis, the pride of Ladue, Missouri. It's lovely, honestly, to watch you. Someone who doesn't love the spotlight always. To me, no one deserves it more, but you stepped out in it brightly. What feelings, what thoughts went through your mind in that moment?
Yeah, I wasn't even sure I wanted to have a 200 cap celly. As you know, I lost my dad earlier this year. So it was something I was like, I don't really know if I want the attention right now. And then someone reminded me that it's not really about you for these celebrations. It's really about all the people that had a role in guiding me to that moment. So when I stepped out onto the field, I was thrilled that, my mom was there with the flowers and Zola was there and my brothers and some nieces and nephews and even my club coaches made it out onto the field. And I was like, guys, how did you even make it down here? They're like, I don't know. We just followed everyone else. So I had quite the entourage and, I was worried that it was going to be too emotional for me. And really I could not stop smiling because I know my dad would have gotten a kick out of the whole day. And so, the girls really made me feel special all day. The Federation did. And then to play in St. Louis and, the crowd's reception. And it was just really lovely. Honestly, the whole day was just wonderful.
You broke the 200 cap mark during the pandemic. So Tuesday's night celebration was actually belated because you've actually won 216 US caps by now, which by my math is exactly 216 more than me. But you and I have both scored exactly the same number of goals as each other. Who would figure that? 0.
Who would have figured it?
I know, it's amazing. It's what bonds us. It's what bonds us both. And Before Tuesday night's game, there was a tribute video from your teammates in which they were all asked what they give to see a Becky Sauerbrunn US goal for that national team. The incredible Rose Lavelle just looked dead at the camera and said she'd give up both of her legs for that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, there's definitely a push to get me my first goal. We had a couple set pieces designed just for me. And it's so funny because they've sprinkled those in throughout the years to try to get me a goal. And they just never come off. It just never happens. And easily in St. Louis against Ireland, that second game was the closest I've ever been to scoring on a set piece designed for myself. I mean, it would have been too good to be true.
Let's pretend we're rolling tape. This, dear listeners, was inside 3 minutes. This emotional crescendo at the outset, and then inside 3 minutes, the set piece floated in. Becky Sauerbrunn crushing the ball, a towering header. The bar reverberating. I think it still is. What did that feel like, Becky? What did that feel like?
Well, first it was shock that I'd even connected with the ball. Because even, I'm telling you, Raj, even in training when we practice these things, like they're flying over me, someone else is scoring the goals. It like just doesn't work. So the fact that I actually got contact, I was like, oh man, like there's a chance. And then kind of blacked out, not really sure what happened, hit the bar. And then I'm just like smiling because of course it's not going to go in, but at least it was close. At least it was, exciting.
Roosevelt would give her legs, which is quite a sacrifice.
Just a little one.
Seeing as what those legs have done for our nation. But what would you give to score that first goal? Does it irritate you? Does it annoy you, other than having idiots like me bring it up on podcasts like this? Or is it just like that is not what the game is about to Becky Sauerbrunn?
It does not irritate me at all. So I would not give anything. If it happens, it happens. It's to me, it's just like, when they create these set pieces for me, I like kind of internally roll my eyes because I would never do that externally. But it's just, if it happens, it happens. I think we should stop forcing it, like specifically for set pieces. But it's fun because what usually happens is someone else scores a goal, and it's great because Foxy scored that first game and then Alana scored that second game. So it's like,
Alana Coy.
Oh yeah. So like if I don't score as a defender, like clearly the other defenders are going to score, and I'm all here for that.
God, I love your Zen philosophy on this. I will read the Tao of Becky Sauerbrunn, but it was a gorgeous moment when Alana Cook floated that ball in from way, way downtown. And how did she celebrate? She ran over to you.
She did. And I like caught eyes with her because Alana doesn't really show a lot of emotion on the field. And I was like,
None.
is she coming to me? And she just is like, full on eye contact running over to me. And I was like, I'm going to get a hug. I'm going to get a hug. She came to, and honestly, like that was so sweet of her to do. And I mean, obviously so pumped for her because that's an awesome goal to get.
Becky, it is particularly wonderful to be with you. I said up top, we are just 98 days from the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. And I wonder how much is that World Cup on your mind right now? Is there a countdown clock somewhere in the Sauerbrunn residence near the cat litter, perhaps?
I mean, it's everywhere. Even when we're in camp, they always like to put up slides at the welcome meeting that's like, this many games left, this many training sessions, this many meetings. And so we're reminded of it a lot. And I think that's good because you need to feel that pressure now. So you start getting used to being uncomfortable about it, because it is a stressful thing preparing for a World Cup. And the more that you can get settled with those uncomfortable feelings, the better off you're going to be for it.
Is it always in your mind? Is it one of those things like a big exam when you're a kid, or just a daunting challenge ahead that even when you're, watching the new season of The Bear, you're still fully aware like World Cup's coming, the World Cup's coming. You can never just shake it.
No, there are moments where you absolutely have to get away, and so you're just not consumed by it. But absolutely, when I'm at camp or back with Portland and you're doing these training sessions, you're like, every rep matters. Like, this could be the difference between me helping this team to win the World Cup or me being the one that is responsible for us losing, which I don't want to have.
Don't even speak it into
Don't even put it into the ether.
Thank you.
So yeah, when I'm watching the second season of The Bear, like I will use that as my escapism so I can get back to a very healthy mental state. But when it's soccer time, you're kind of just wringing every ounce of tactics, technique, psychological, anything, any advantage that you can get out of a rep, you're taking it.
Let's talk about the last two friendlies. The first, a 2-0 victory against an impressively gritty Ireland. The second, a 1-0 victory against the same opponent. We'll talk about those games in a moment, but the big narrative coming out of these warm-ups was a devastating one. The injury to goal-scoring sensation Mal Swanson, a torn patella tendon, almost certain to miss the World Cup. And I can't imagine what that must feel like in game, 2 international matches before the tournament, to watch a young player in the form of a life pick up an injury like that. Part of me was like, I can't imagine how much that knocked the wind out of all of you. You know, in game, how do you experience it? And what do you even say to her post game?
It's tragic. And like you said, Mal has been on this like renaissance where she's just a world beater. And even off the field, you know, she's been really coming into her own in leadership roles, you know, speaking up more in meetings. And even when it's player only meetings, if it's tactics, you know, she's speaking her mind. And to have this happen to her, I think is just so cruel. And then on a team level, to lose a player like her at this moment, it's terrible. I mean, honestly, it's terrible. And they're huge cleats to fill. And you know, we're going to do our best to absolutely fill that, but Mal's going to leave a spot that, you know, can't fully be filled. And she was so, I don't want to say gracious. I don't know what the right word is, but, you know, people were sending her messages and she took the time to write back to every single one. And even for me, she was like, I'm sorry, I can't celebrate you in St. Louis. And I'm like, Mal, like, that's really lovely of you to say, but not what you should be thinking about right now. So it's really sad. And in the moment, you know, you could see that she was in extraordinary pain. And Rose, you know, right off the bat ran to her, got down, was kind of rubbing her shoulders. And then Alex Morgan came over and Alyssa was like, you know, just look at me. Don't look anywhere else. Just focus on me. And our athletic trainers were unreal. You know, they kind of walked her through step by step what they were doing to make sure that she knew, like, okay, we're going to wrap your leg up. We're going to put you on the stretcher, like just to try to bring back some calm. But you could tell that when she was carted off, that players were in varying states of distress. You know, you had people in tears. You had people who thought they were going to be physically ill from seeing what they saw. And, you know, in that moment, you try to do what you can for those players to like bring them back to, okay, we do have to play the rest of this game. But it's very individual and you need to know the players and how they respond to things. And so if you need to give someone distance, you give them distance. If you need to rub their shoulders, you know, put your arm around them, rub their shoulders. And so our response to after the aftermath, I thought was pretty good. And I think that's something that unfortunately for Mal, you know, she's now injured, had surgery. But for us to know that if something like that happens, which it does happen in sports, unfortunately, that we can somehow rebound and get to a place where we can do the work that still needs to be done.
Yeah, as captain, what do you say to your teammates in the wait to bring them back into focus after witnessing something as just excruciating, so unbelievably, unfathomably upsetting as Mal's injury? Is there something that you can say?
You know, we kind of talked about it afterwards if we should have brought the whole team together, because that's happened in the past when there's been some horrific injuries where, you know, someone will bring everyone together and you say something. And for whatever reason, we just didn't do that. And we kind of all individually checked on one another. And we made sure that we were communicating to the people on the side, that they knew what was happening, that Mal was talking. And obviously she waved to the crowd afterwards so people knew that she was decently okay. But in that moment, you know, it was really just reaching out to the people that you could tell that were distressed and just asking like, hey, do you need anything in this moment? And some people did. And some people were like, I think I'm okay.
Godspeed to you, Mal Swanson, and a speedy return to just that incredible, joyful burst of form. I am interested about the squad, that feeling in these camps. They are strange ones. This was the last camp before World Cup roster selection. I'm always curious about the vibes inside that locker room. You're all teammates. There's great vibe, but you're all working ultimately together to win. But on another level, many of you are competing against each other to be on that squad for starting spots, for playing time, for roles. And Vlatko said Tuesday night he's got 10 to 12 players fighting for 6 or 7 spots. I mean, that is like the worst episode of Survivor ever, to get onto that World Cup roster, to snag a starting spot in Australia and New Zealand. Can you describe the strange tension that can create?
Yes, and I have been through that tension a few times now, so I kind of know what to expect, and I can kind of feel it coming on when the year starts. And it's just unsettling. And, you're fighting for spots, you're fighting for roles, and you go into training and you're reading too much into the breakdown of this training session or that scrimmage. And, so you're just like overanalyzing everything, and you're just like, why am I doing this to myself? But it happens every single time. And, people go into tackles a little bit harder, so everyone's trying to show their stuff. And so, maybe some people take a shot that they shouldn't shoot. And it's an interesting time. And then you always have to, the veterans that have been through it, kind of bring it back and remind everyone that it's team first. And yes, you want to show your stuff, but the way you're going to make it onto the World Cup roster is if you're a good teammate and you're willing to do all the work, not just the fancy stuff, not just, the assists, the goals. It's the ones that are willing to do the track back running or the slide tackle to block a cross, like these little things that don't really get celebrated. Sometimes people forget that that's going to put you on the World Cup roster. So it's reminding people you need to do all of it.
Yeah, it is fascinating. We've all been there with lesser stakes, just overanalyzing everything, every single moment, every single decision in a situation. But now that you are, through this so many times and really one of the most experienced leaders in the group, are you aware, are you conscious of the players who are really in that place of competition, that fraught place of anxiety? Do you treat them any differently? Do you give them a little more space because you know how tense they are? Put your arm around them a little bit because you know how much they've got on the line, or is that's not the way?
No, I check in on them, and sometimes it's a coffee, a little side conversation, even if it's just a check in, like, hey, how you doing? And sometimes it's just they just tell you everything that's on their mind, and so it's just letting them know that I'm here if they want to talk about it. I can be a soundboard if they have any questions. I'm always of the mind that it's better to be certain or more sure of your spot currently than it is to live in this like gray area where you're not sure. And even if it's bad news that you hear, to know that there are things that you could correct, to me is way more beneficial than kind of just carrying on as you are in this, am I not doing the right thing?
Purgatory is often worse than hell. I don't know if that makes sense, theologians who are listening, but I'm going to go with it. A weird segue. Alyssa Thompson made her first international start Tuesday night, aged 18 years and 155 days, which is, I'm going to say this one very quickly, it's exactly half your age. And football teams, they are hilarious. There's few other places like a football squad in life where you're thrown together, in that kind of a situation. What is that like for you as an experience? Is it something you're cognizant of, or is it just like there's just an equality and you don't even notice?
I don't really notice. Obviously, it kind of gets thrown into the face a little bit because I think people like the narrative about how old I am and how young she is. And it doesn't bother me at all because, like you said, you're on that national team for a reason. And, it shouldn't be in any way defined by your age. It should only be defined by your talent. And so the fact that I've stuck around this long, that Alyssa, is half my age, like, whatever, like, that's great. Like, what a great story.
Yeah, you just keep telling yourself you are exactly half Tim Ream's age. And that is just, St. Louis's finest. That is the way to go. For you personally, Becky, this is what's incredible. You are on the cusp of your 4th World Cup. I mean, incredible. It's incredible. You've won 2. Does it feel different this time? Does it feel like more pressure? Does it feel less pressure? Adjusted priorities? Adjusted excitement levels? Or do you just have a set World Cup mindset that you just lock into each and every time in a groove?
Each and every time I have been the same amount of a stress ball that I am currently right now. I try to keep a great perspective on it, and so grateful that I could potentially be going to my 4th, because to me that's like unreal. If you told, 13-year-old Becky that she was going to get to go to 4 World Cups, she would never have believed it. And so the pressure to me is the same, while also maybe having an adjusted perspective in that I really want these younger players to know what it feels like to win a World Cup. It really is such an amazing experience. And so we have a very young squad, and I love that about us. And so I want them to experience that. And also the fact that we could do a back-to-back-to-back, which is unheard of in soccer history, that is also a driving factor, because that would be super cool to make history.
It's incredible. By the way, the back-to-back-to-back thing is a bit of a joke at Men in Blazers, because the first time we heard it was from Ovechkin, the Washington Capital, who just won the Stanley Cup, and he came on and I asked him if the goal now was to go back-to-back, and he just looks at me in the camera and he goes, back, to back, to back. And then he kept going on, and I think of it like, obviously the Washington Capitals, who I love, crapped out very early in the next season, so they was 1 and out. But you guys have done that, and every time I think about that, back to back to back, only the US Women's National Team, and always in Ovi's beautiful, beautiful tongue. But I want to talk more about you and go a little bit back into the old Becky Sauerbrunn biography for a moment. 3 World Cups so far, 216 caps. You played in 2 entirely different American women's soccer leagues at the club level. Becky Sauerbrunn, you are sitting on an incredible well of footballing life, an incredible well of footballing experience. One of the reasons, honestly, I've been so excited to do this series with you is to dig into the old Sauerbrunn archives a little bit, and go back to the beginning, before She Believes was ever created as a word, before World Cup roster anxiety, back to the 1990s, the muddy soccer pitches of St. Louis, Missouri, where you began. Take us back there. Where does the Sauerbrunn football journey begin? The first kick.
Ooh, the first kick, as it always usually is, at a local park. And my town, Olivet, had this athletic association where they would just throw groups of kids together and have someone's dad or mom be the coach. And I was thrown on a team with a bunch of my school friends. Like, my elementary school was right across the street from Stacy Park, which is the park that I first played soccer at. And we just had such a great time. It was like me, one of my best friends, Katie Ward, who lived down the street for me, and all these guys. And so we played soccer, some baseball, some basketball, but like the soccer team, like we just had so much fun that we purposely tried to get paired together during all the years that OAA was available to us.
Something you've told me before that I really find fascinating. As a kid, we see you as the leader, the warrior on and off the field now, but you were immensely shy off the field as a kid, but also on the field. You were so much bloody freer. There's a story that I love. You scored a goal at 8 years old, whole team swarming around you, celebrating as if you just won the World Cup. And you said that moment, that attention from your peers, really became an inception point for your love of the game. Can you talk about that moment? Because such a surprising story for anyone that watches you on the field. But it also links to your kind of pathway in your career of modestly shirking personal glory.
Yeah, and I didn't really have a word for it when I was younger, but I'm definitely introverted, and it started from a young age, and attention for me has always been, it makes me feel weird. And something about being on the field really made me feel free and connected, and to this day, it's still kind of a surprise when people like celebrate me on the field or off the field. And so for whatever reason, those moments like that where you score a goal or you do something great and people come up to you and, I think I probably cried, because the attention was just overwhelming. But it is, those pivotal moments that really like cement your passion for something. And those are the moments for me where I was like, I love this. This is so great.
What was it about football, do you think, which brought out that other freer, slightly less introverted side out of Becky Sauerbrunn?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew what it was about soccer that early on, but I honestly think it was just the sheer amount of fun that we were having on the field. And I think because St. Louis has such a rich history of soccer that the people that you're around, the coaches that you're around, they know a little bit more about the game, and, the fields are all available, and there's like, we've got the hills, we've got some Italians. And so there's just like different populations of people that love the sport and, are having their kids play the sport. So you're just kind of surrounded by this diversity of people that love soccer in St. Louis. And that was really cool too. And I'm not sure if I was so cognizant of it growing up, but looking back, I'm like, oh, that's a big reason why St. Louis is still, I think, a hotbed for players, to reach the national levels.
It is interesting to me. You mentioned that you played early on mostly with boys, which is a familiar refrain from that time, that era. Often we hear that the players say early on, I was the only girl on my team. But the commonness of it doesn't belie the fact that it's a bloody difficult thing to do, particularly, as you've said, if you're on the shyer side. Was it something that you were self-aware of, being the only girl, or once that whistle blew, was it just like, all right, let's do this?
It really was once the whistle blew, let's do this. And the guys treated me just the same, like we were buds. And so if I messed up, they would heckle me or joke about me and vice versa. And so it felt really equal out there. And it was actually kind of the outside world that tried to point me out a little bit more. And so like when we would be given trophies, my trophy would be a girl when everyone else's was a boy. And so that's when I was like, oh, I guess maybe this is different.
That's amazing. I love that they prepared one because they had a feeling you guys might win. So they had one like,
exactly.
For that Sauerbrunn kid. With a little post-it on Sauerbrunn. I don't know how many people know this, but you actually grew up playing mostly indoor soccer. First with that boys team, then you moved over to a girls indoor team. What was its name?
No, it was SLU for the girls, St. Louis United, and for the boys, it was the Raiders.
Oh, the mighty, mighty SLU. We know St. Louis, you've said it, it's one of the great oases of football in our nation. Also, one of the great oases of indoor soccer. City had 2 professional indoor teams when you were growing up. They had the Ambush and they had the Mighty Steamers, one of my top 10 team names of all time. And you and your teammates would go and watch games on the weekends. Because indoor soccer is such a different creature than grass football. Do you think that indoor background affected your style of play as you were developing in those formative years?
Oh, I think it very much has guided my soccer style, even to this day, having not really played indoor soccer for more than just, pick up or for fun. But it is such a different game. Obviously you've got the boards, but you've got less players. So much of it is like close range passing or movement off the ball. And of course you need those things on, 11 aside. But it's just so much more sharper and dynamic on the indoor game. And so it's funny for me, when I first started playing outdoors, I could not hit a long ball. I probably couldn't hit a long ball properly through college. Because I remember Steve Swanson at UVA being like, all right, we're going to have some individuals because you cannot strike this ball right. I'm like, yeah, I know. So I was great like short range passing, but like asked me to hit a long ball, wasn't going to happen. So in a way, so I will blame that. But I also think that because of indoor soccer, I can solve things a little bit faster. I see angles a little bit quicker. And for me, I think that fits my style of play. I'm definitely more analytical than I am, reactionary.
Many players I've spoken to over the years have got a story, a formative story, stay an extra hour after practice just to work on free kicks, or the hours spent smacking the ball against a tree in the backyard, whatever, just trying to hit that same spot over and over and over again. Did you have anything like that kind of single-minded application that you think back to of your coming of age as a footballer?
Yes, definitely. And much to my dad's chagrin, if he were to hear this, is, I would punt the ball up onto the roof because we had this perfectly slanted roof, and it would just drop down and bounce perfectly to work on my first touch, or I'd like juggle it out of there and kick it back up. And absolutely a few times hitting it against the garage, but that left a mark. And so I got found out pretty quickly on that one. And my backyard, we had these amazing trees that it was basically an obstacle course, and you could just dribble and do different like dribbling variations around all these trees. That one, those two could be a goal, or, that one can be the forward. And it was one of those things where I'd set up an obstacle course and have to do it to perfection, and only left foot, only right foot, no mistakes, under 10 seconds, and I would just get better and better and better at it. And it was such a great feeling. And little known fact is that usually I would put on the radio, if a Steamers or Ambush game was on, I would put on the radio call of the game.
And just listen to it and dribble through the trees and pretend it was you that they were commentating on. I love. I also love that by kicking the ball off the roof of your house, pissing off your dad. Thank you to your father for that sacrifice for our nation's benefit, ultimately, in terms of that first touch. You also, essentially, modestly, you invented the bounce back, which is one of the great pieces of football technology. But that groundbreaking 1999 World Cup, you were just 14 years old. That pivotal moment in the history of the women's game. I couldn't love the serendipity of this more. You, young Becky Sauerbrunn, were actually there in the packed crowd at Soldier Field in Chicago. You watched the US demolish Nigeria 7-1 in that group stage. What do you remember about that day? What feelings have stuck with you sitting in that 65,000 capacity sold out stadium watching that legendary US team?
First thing I remember, how freaking hot it was. It was so hot. And we were on like the upper tier, very, very high up. But what I do remember is watching Carla Overbeck in the middle of the defense and just her like sheer command of the back line. And you could see her like barking orders to people, running the line. And as someone who had just recently kind of found my place as a defender and a center back, I was just like spellbound. I was like, this chick is badass. I am absolutely going to try to style my game after her, because you could just see it. It was like palpable.
What was it?
It was just like a presence. And in soccer, like, it when someone has an X factor, you see it and you can feel it and you can't even explain it sometimes. And she had that X factor, and I was like, I need to have an X factor, and I'm going to steal hers.
I need an X factor. I love that. Steal that X factor. So were you like that? Were you like that? That is what I want to be. I'm going to steal that X factor and be that. Or were you looking at these players as if they were like gods, demigods descended from the heavens?
Oh, no. They are absolutely demigods. They, to me, were like untouchable. And when I watched that final, that was such a pivotal moment for me, because 14 in my parents' house, watching the game with my dad, watching them celebrate after Brandy Chastain's PK, and just like the celebration, the sheer joy on their face, I was like, I have to know what that feels like. I have to know. And I never thought I was actually going to ever feel it. And then here I am, and I've gotten to feel that twice over, and that's remarkable.
I love that. The X Factor stealing that. I want to know that feeling. But we also need to make clear, there's a flourishing NWSL in our nation right now, but 14-year-old Becky was living in a world before professional women's club football. The national team was the end-all and be-all, really, of what you could achieve as a female footballer in the United States in the 20th century. And I'm curious, watching these 99ers at age 14, you just started moving up the ladder of the youth national system. What even felt possible to you at the time as an end goal?
I mean, at the time, to be honest, every time I got invited into a youth national camp or a regional camp, I was like, oh, wow, like, this is amazing. Like, take it for what it is. This is a gift. And I thought, if everything was to work out perfectly, like, I would kind of just go up the ladder. I'd play for the 14s, the 16s, the 17s, the 19s, the 21s, and I was very fortunate that that's pretty much how my trajectory went. I always had in the back of my mind, the senior national team. Like, obviously, like, that's the goal. But to me, it very much was like, that's the dream. And it was, goals are achievable. Dreams are sometimes achievable, but not always. And so I had hopes, but I also just felt like, I don't think I have it to get to that level.
You are incredibly organized as a thinker, incredibly goal-oriented, incredibly practical. There's a manager who's actually a US international, David Wagner, who says, I don't like to have my players to have dreams, because dreams are what you have when you're asleep. They need to be more practical. And when I hear your approach, you are the most practical, really just goal-oriented, one of the most that I've interviewed, the Olympic development level, that first stage of national identification for youth players. You'd laid out a quota system with a set number of times you'd have to force yourself to speak up on the pitch during a training session. And I find it, I mean, it is amazing just having the ability to articulate and problem solve issues, challenges at that age. I mean, it's unfathomable. Talk to me how the quotas actually worked.
Yeah, well, we, at a young age with the youth national team, we brought in a sports psychologist, and my world was blown. I was like, this is the coolest thing that I have ever heard. And she, I mean, looking back, it was just goal setting. It was just here are goals that you need to set that are quantifiable. So you need to put a number to them. You need to be able to check it and say you did it, or an X that you didn't do it. And I was like, oh my goodness, how many of us set goals that you can't really say yes or no? And I would write in a journal before every game, and even some training sessions if I felt like I wasn't training well, little goals to remind myself I need to speak up here. I need to hit 2 or 3 long balls, even though, like I said, I couldn't hit long balls. So I was still trying though, look for long balls. And eventually I just didn't have to write them down anymore. I would just kind of set them in my mind before the training or the game. And in the run of the game, I'd be like, okay, I can check that one off. That's great. I succeeded, or I didn't succeed in that, but at least I tried it. And to me, what I love so much about soccer is that sense of accomplishment when you do something very difficult and you've been working on it and training and doing all the little things to get it to a place where it's successful. And that's so addicting. And I love that about soccer, that addicting sense of accomplishment. It can be huge, but it can also be talking and telling someone to step, or me looking for a long ball when I don't want to hit a long ball. Those little things of bravery.
Hitting a long ball and talking out loud at the same time. Just that is rainbows and unicorns. But do you feel at this stage in your career that confidence building is something that still requires active attention? Or was there a moment when it all just clicked, just became natural?
Oh, no. I don't think, especially for me, it does not come natural. It is a constant journey for me to find confidence and to foster my confidence. And where do I get it from? Is it external, internal? Making sure it's not too external, because that is a rocky road right there. And so just making sure that I'm doing the things that I need to do, the tools that I've learned over the years, the ways that I can reset myself to get to, a healthy mindset to go the next day. Because soccer very much is a cruel sport. It can go up and down. You never know on the day if you'll be able to connect A to B. And to be able to reset and find ways to reset yourself, I think is critical.
We will talk more about this arc in the next episode. I feel we may be entering Becky Sauerbrunn, the college era. But talking about confidence building at this stage of your career, we sit here 2 games into the NWSL season. You and your mighty Portland Thorns, they're only defending champions after taking home the 2022 NWSL Championship back in October. And I loved the pictures, the photographs, the video of your teammate Megan Klingenberg puffing on a victory cigar like a Yinzer Carlo Ancelotti, 17-year-old Olivia Moultrie, frankly looking terrified in the background of every photograph as Budweisers were just cracked and slung. But we haven't had you on the pod since then, Becky. Catch us up. How did you celebrate that championship?
Oh, it was a tough year to be an NWSL player. And then when you then add that I was on the Portland Thorns with all the things that have been happening with the Thorns over the past years and how much the players have had to handle a lot of that and navigate that, I don't think anyone would have expected for us to win the championship. And I don't know if that galvanized us a little bit, but we definitely came together and found a form of play where we were really kind of highlighting each other's strengths and minimizing our weaknesses. And we were all loving being around each other. And, a lot of people say that, and I've been a part of a lot of teams, but something about, the players in the Thorns, it's just a genuinely good environment. And there's always, rough times and good times, but we enjoyed being around each other. And so winning that championship was awesome, and we celebrated super hard. As you talked about, there were stogies, a lot of beers, there's champagne. There was Liv standing awkwardly on the side of the locker room, which is fine. My introversion hit halfway through, so I also was standing awkwardly away from the crowd for a little bit. You just celebrate the way you need to celebrate. But it was great, and the reception from the city when we came back was awesome as well. So it was on the field, it was a good year, and then obviously still off-field matters that we need to take care of.
I want to talk more about that in a moment, but this NWSL season is something of a surreal one. A World Cup plonked right down in the middle of it. And that's got to change your approach mentally. Is there a point in the season where players start to have more than one eye on the World Cup and the World Cup only?
I think that is very individual. I think some players, when they're with their professional teams, are all about their professional teams. Some are always kind of like, okay, my eye is with the national team. Like, that's my goal. So I'm using this environment. I'm going to do my best, but my hope is that I'll be on the national team. So it's really individual. For me, I think I appreciate the NWSL so much that it would be a disservice to my teammates on the Thorns and to the NWSL to not give my all. And when I'm with the Thorns, I'm with the Thorns. And then when I'm with the national team, I'm with the national team. And I will always just try to give my best. And I know like it gets a little scary, the few games left right before the World Cup. You want to stay healthy, but you still want to play well. And so it's an interesting time because, you're like, should I go into that slide tackle? Should I jump out of it? And those are the times when you actually get in the most trouble. You should just go through it. So just go through the tackle. Just don't jump out of it. But it's an interesting time. And also this World Cup is about a month later than it usually is. So in the past, I've played maybe 2 or 3 games with my club team before I go off for international duty. And this go around, it's like 10 or 12 games. And so your professional play is instrumental to your preparation for the World Cup, but also for making the roster. And so these players, like you said earlier, that are fighting for these spots, like we have to ball out these next 8-10 games because like this is it. Like we're done with international duty until that roster is announced. And so this is your time to shine. You
wrote a really beautiful open letter earlier this week to the people of New Zealand. It was published in the media outlet Stuff. I always read, of all the New Zealand outlets, Stuff is the one that I read, and it came across. I was delighted to see it. You praise New Zealand. It's a lovely piece. We will post it. But you talked about New Zealand where the United States will play its group games. You talked about how you marvel at New Zealand's commitment to gender equality and women's rights. You talked about how the World Cup is going to be the biggest women's sporting event of all time. In your words, you said not only will it showcase the supreme talent and skill of the world's best female soccer players, but it will also demonstrate the value of empowerment and the growth of the women's game. Becky, you acknowledge that the Kiwis will obviously be cheering for their own national team, the mighty football Ferns, but you also hoped that they'd adopt the US as their second team. It was a really lovely gesture to one of the home nations. I was really moved when I read it. What made you decide to write it?
Well, we were offered the opportunity to do so. And, we're asked to do these types of things a decent amount. But for New Zealand to ask and it being 100 days out, it just felt like a perfect opportunity to basically thank them for everything that they're going to do for the women's game by hosting 2023 with Australia. But what they have done, even if you look at 2022, they hosted the Women's World Cup in both cricket and rugby. And those were both phenomenal events, and they did a great job hosting. And so to see a nation really trying to put the women's game, it doesn't matter which sport, just women's athletes on a platform and a stage that really showcases how amazing the product actually is and how amazing these women are. I really wanted to thank them. And yeah, if we're their second favorite team, that'd be great as well, because it always helps to have support.
I did think about that piece when I watched the beginning of Tuesday night's game. Watching you on the field before kickoff in St. Louis, and the cameras pan to the Irish team. And normally in those situations when the opposing team is doing some award that's only important to them, normally the players are just dead-eyed watching something that really just doesn't concern them. But you could tell as the Irish players were looking at you. Many of them had a genuine joy in their eyes. And I watched it and I thought, oh my Lord, if that isn't a reflection of the fact that the battle for equality that you, the US women, but you in particular, Becky, have fought off the field, a recognition that it will create change for far more than just the United States. You know, we saw and heard the Canadians battle their own federation during the She Believes tournament in February. That's ongoing. We've seen the French and the Spanish fight their own grinding conflicts with their own associations, and more and more and more. This World Cup, it's undoubtedly going to be the most highly competed on the field. But does it feel like it's one that's going to have to be watched almost through dual lenses, marvelling at the play, but retaining another eye on the roiling turmoil between the players and their different battles for safety, for equality and respect of it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it would be a disservice to us if you didn't see it both ways, because we are who we are because of the battles that we've gone through and that we continue to go through. And the women's team, my team, for the first time, will be going in without a huge barrier in pay equality. Of course, there are other things that we're always going to use our platform for, but going into 2019, that was pretty much a huge talking point, is if we could do this, be successful on the field while also fighting for pay equality. And we did do that. And for these federations and these teams that are going into 2023, like, this is a platform that they absolutely can and should use to show their fight and their collective strength in fighting for stuff that they believe in, whether it's pay or working conditions or even just safety, for health and body. And it would absolutely, my hope is that is a talking point, that each team really is going through something. And what's amazing is that FIFPro, the Players Association that represents every single federation and every single federation's team, they're also fighting the good fight within FIFA and coordinating amongst teams, different protests that can happen. And I don't know if you've noticed, but over this last international window, a lot of teams are wearing purple tape around their wrist, which actually started with Canada, and Canada asked us to participate with them. But even Ireland is now wearing it. And during She Believes, Brazil and Japan, they were wearing it. So each federation is going through something. Each women's team is going through something. And so individually and then collectively all together, I hope that 2023 becomes so much of a launching point of talk around how amazing the women are on the field, but also off the field.
Amen to that. Is there a sense of freedom this time around, with equal pay finally locked in, that you don't have to compartmentalize, you don't have to be fighting on two different fronts? Or knowing you, are you now focused on all the many fights, federation to federation across the globe?
I'm ecstatic that we don't have to go through any more pay equality battles, because it was a lot and it was long. But now we, as a Players Association, very much want to help every federation reach pay equality. And so, yeah, I'm not individually going to be focused on, our lawyers and things like that, but I definitely feel a sense of responsibility to help other players and other federations who are going to use the World Cup as a platform. And so there are also so many other things, that's we can use our platform for. So whether it's, LGBTQ, racial equality, there's always something that we should be using our platform to help make right and help make good.
Becky, last couple of questions for you. We've talked a lot this podcast about the experience of this week, playing at home, St. Louis again. And one final moment I love is watching you at the end, striding up to the crowd. You found a squad of young teens in the crowd from Ladue Soccer, Ladue, the suburb you came of age in. And I found it was really poetic to witness, to think of you being 14, watching the 1999ers in Soldier Field, Chicago, knowing the impact it had on you, and now watching you come full circle in life, striding towards that group of girls, thinking about the impact that moment will have on them. First of all, would 14-year-old Becky have believed, if you went back in time now and said, don't worry, shy one, you will grow up to be a World Cup winner and you'll be a change-making captain of your nation, what would she have said to you?
The 14-year-old Becky?
Yeah.
I don't believe you. You liar. You're lying to yourself. No, I never would have.
Without making eye contact.
Yeah, exactly. Never would have believed it. And and in a way, like, I would not want to have known the end or the trajectory of my career at that age, because that would have completely changed my approach to everything. And as I've gotten into the twilight of my career, being able to look at my journey and how I did struggle with confidence, and I still struggle at times. And I wasn't sure if I was ever going to make the national team, and now to be around for 216 caps, like, I needed those struggles, I think, to get to where I am today. And so I'm glad I didn't know it was going to be like this.
What one thing, knowing your journey, the challenges overcome, would you say to those Ledoux girls so that they can follow in your footsteps and become not only, I mean, one of them, please God, captain of our nation, but someone who's changed the women's game for everyone?
You have to make mistakes. You have to go for it. And it's scary. And sometimes you're going to feel like a coward, and sometimes you're going to feel brave, but go for it. If you're interested in it, dive into it. Maybe you'll love it. Maybe you hate it. Make mistakes, learn from your mistakes, but just don't try to be perfect, because it's impossible. You can strive for it, but be willing to accept where you land and find joy in that.
Becky Sauerbrunn, find joy in that. Out of this podcast, I do believe we will create the Zen of Becky Sauerbrunn, the Tao of Becky Sauerbrunn. You are the single greatest. Godspeed to you, your Portland Thorns, and your US women's national team. Only 98 days to go to the World Cup. We cannot wait to watch this journey. Thank you for your time, your wisdom, your passion. It's incredible joy to be with you.
Thanks, Raj.
Big love and courage.